Good morning to everybody. This morning, what I'm going to do is to have a general discussion on Mula Madhyamik Karika and the philosophy of emptiness. By now, we have read fair number of chapters of Nagarjuna. In fact, if you can read the entire book, so much the better. But as I said at the very beginning, if you understand, say, several chapters of Nagarjuna, Mula Madhyamik Karika, you can understand, in fact, the whole book. Because entire book has one purpose. That purpose is to show that Swabhava, or the one's own nature, is not right way to understand the teaching of the Buddha. Now, this is the main idea in Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamik Karika philosophy. And the rest of the things is the method Nagarjuna is using to advance this view. So the basic view is very clear. He wants to show that Swabhava, one's own nature, is not correct. In fact, Nagarjuna tries to show in the history of Buddhism, particularly in the Sarvastivada, they developed this idea that everything exists through all three periods. And in order to explain this, they came up with the idea of Swabhava. And interesting thing is, within the Buddhist tradition, of course, everybody is Anatmavadins. Nobody rejected Anatmavada. But being Anatmavadins, still they try to maintain some kind of essence that persists through all three time periods, which is a philosophical concept. Now, Swabhava is a philosophical concept. Very often we ask why Nagarjuna is using Shunyata, why not Anatma, used by the Buddha. The main reason is Buddha taught Anatma to the people in India around 6th century BCE, basically those people who believed in Atmavada. So Atma is an essence, but they believed in, but that was a fairly crude view. To believe that within us there is something called Atma. But nevertheless, it was a very popular view because you can explain many things from Atmavada. If Atmavada is true, it's very easy to explain karma, punarbhava, sansara, nirvana, everything very easy to explain if Atma is true. Because you have one and the same person going through the sansara. But when you reject it, easily you fall into the other side. Other side is annihilationism, Uchchedavada. So, the one hand you believe in Atmavada, which is Sassatavada, eternalism. If you reject Sassatavada, you automatically fall into Uchchedavada. So, these were the two polar views during the time of the Buddha. Either you are Anatmavadin and Shasvatavadin, or you are Uchchedavadin or annihilationist, rejecting everything. Now, the beauty of the teaching of the Buddha is, Buddha avoids these both extremes and treads a middle path, where Buddha rejects Atma, but of course Buddha does not reject sansara, karma and nirvana. But the issue is, if you reject Atma, how can you maintain sansara, karma and nirvana? Because you have to maintain the identity. You have to maintain the identity also. Otherwise, karma is not made meaningful. good and bad karmas. And also practice is not meaningful unless you have some kind of continuity. Particularly when you believe that from being Prutajjana, you become Sotapanna, and then you become Sakadagami, Anagami, and then finally Arahant. But Sotapanna can be dead and born again. Same thing for Sakadagami and also Anagami. Now, how can you explain these things without believing in some kind of continuity? So, this is really the issue. When the Buddha rejected Atmavada, Brahmins dumped Buddha into Uchedavada. They used the word Venaiko Samano Gotamo. Venaiko. Venaika means one who advocates destruction. So this word has been used to refer to the Buddha it is mentioned in the, so Venaiko. Venaika. Venaika means one who advocates vinasha, or one who advocates destruction. So very easily Buddha was dumped into that category because Buddha rejects Atma. And in the Indian philosophical tradition, they use two words, Astika and Nastika. Astika means, Asti means positive. That means those who believe in Atma. Nastika means negative, those who reject the concept of Atma. Now, who are the Nastikas in the Buddhist tradition? Charvaka and the Buddha. So, it is very clear. So, if you reject the concept of Atma, then you are a nihilist. But the challenging thing in the teaching of the Buddha is, while rejecting the Atma, Buddha did not reject the continuity of the human being. Now, the issue is, how can you explain it? Buddha uses in the discourses Khanda, Dhatu, Ayatana, this analysis to show how human being continues. But this is a difficult thing to understand. Even today we have problem, If somebody asks you really seriously, it will not be very easy to explain. I mean, as almost all of us are born Buddhist, so we don't question these things. But if you really seriously ask, it is not very easy to explain it. Now, during the Buddha's time, Buddha's disciples themselves had problem about it. Atma is very easy in a way. To explain, Atma is very easy. Sati Bhikkhu thought that, okay, there is no Atma, but there is Vijnana. And he thought, Vijnanam Sandhavati Sansarati Ananyang. So, Vijnanam Sandhavati Sansarati Ananyang, ne Anyang. Actually, what it means is Vijnana without change goes through the sansara. Because they wanted to explain the continuity. So this is the biggest challenge. So in order to explain the continuity, Bhikkhu Sati thought that Vijnana is the one. So if you reject Atma, then it is the Vijnana. But then Buddha said to Sati, Paticca Samuppannang Vijnanang Bhuttang Maya. I have told you that Vijnana is dependently arisen. So again, Buddha did not reject the idea that Vijnana is that which is Sandhavati Sansarati. Because something has to Sandhavati Sansarati, okay? So Buddha did not reject it according to my understanding. What Buddha rejected was Vijnana Ananyang. Vijnana as unchanging. That's why Buddha said, Paticca Samuppannang Vijnanang Bhuttang Maya. I have told you Vijnana is dependently arisen. So Buddha is comfortable with the Vijnana dependently arisen. But dependently arisen Vijnana continues through samsara. But then, there are again problems. How can you have all these karma, all this knowledge and everything within this momentary mind? That again is a challenging thing. Up to you to answer these questions, not to me. So, but these are very challenging things in the Buddhist tradition. So you can see the later Buddhists coming up with this idea of Svabhava. Okay? later Buddhists. So now Nagarjuna's mission is to show that Swabhava is wrong. So the entire Mula Madhyamika Karika is to show that one idea. Now what he does with various concepts is he takes various concepts and tries to show that, look, if you take this concept karma, karma is not Swabhava. So Viparyasa and all these things not Swabhava. And then we read some chapters, like you remember Agni Indhana, Karma Karaka. We read those things. Agni Indhana, fire and the fuel. Karma Karaka, action and the doer. And also we read Gata Agata, gone and not gone. Now what are all these things? Nagarjuna now, Agni and Indana, it is not a concept in the Dharma. It is not any deep Abhidharma concept. No. Gata Agata, one who has gone and one who has not gone. It is not a concept in the Dharma. But he takes these things and tries to show dependent existence of things. Like if you take Agni and Indana, fire and fuel. There is no fire without fuel. There is no fuel without fire. Anything can be fuel depending on the situation. Now this is a chair, but if you want to put into the fire, this can be fuel. So pratiti samutpanna. What becomes fire, what becomes fuel is dependently arisen. Gata agata, gone and not gone, again dependently arisen. Gone depends on not gone depends on gone. Karma karaka, action and the doer. There is no action without the doer. There is no doer without action. So you cannot talk about these things independently. Now, if anything has Swabhava, then you can talk independently. But Nagarjuna says no Swabhava. Now, same thing when Buddha said, Paticca samuppannang viññānaṃ vuttaṃ maya, I have told you that viññāna is paticca samuppanna without conditions. Actually, Buddha says, Aññatra paccaya nati viññānassa sambhavo. Right? Aññatra paccaya nati viññānassa sambhavo. No arising of viññāna without conditions. Okay? So, this is the basic philosophy. This is the Paticca Samuppada. So, this is what Nagarjuna is trying to show. But over the history, people have interpreted Nagarjuna's philosophy in many different ways. Usually, we are given a very negative idea about Nagarjuna's philosophy. So, we think that Nagarjuna is coming up with, completely new philosophy which is against the Buddha's teaching. In fact, modern scholars have shown that that is wrong. Particularly people like Professor Kalupahana, A.K. Warder, there are many other scholars like that who show that, look, actually Nagarjuna is doing nothing new. He is doing the same Buddhist philosophy. Only thing is, his language is different. I explained to you why his language is different, because he is not addressing Brahmins or anybody. He is addressing the Buddhist, his own Buddhist brothers and sisters. So, this is inside talk actually. So, now in my whole discussions, I try to explain this to you. We read a good number of chapters actually. So, you are, in a way, I'm happy about this course because we could read quite a lot, although we could not read the whole book. In fact, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be talking about two things which are the interpretationally very important, or very important to interpret Nagarjuna. One is the idea of two truths, what we call it Ubhaya Satya. Two truths. Ubhaya Satya. And the other one is actually another philosophical tool used by Nagarjuna, what is called Chatushkoti. 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 Chatuh means four. Koti means corner. So in English we say sometime four-cornered, we say proposition. Four-cornered proposition, Chatushkoti. So two truths. These two are some main ideas, philosophical tools in Nagarjuna's philosophy. And then also the not very easy to understand by ordinary readers. Now I thought I will discuss these two things a little bit today with you, because once we are clear about these concepts, again, interpreting Nagarjuna is not very difficult. So, but these are interesting views, two truths. When you look at the very concept of two truths, you remember in the chapter 24, Arya Satya Pariksha, you have your copy with you if you want to look at Arya Satya Pariksha, Nagarjuna start with Yadi Shunyamidam Sarvam Udayo Nasti Navya. If everything is empty, there will not be Udaya, Vaya, rising and ceasing. And it goes on like that. Finally, Nagarjuna's opponent, Nagarjuna's critic say that, look, Nagarjuna, if your Shunyata is right, then entire Buddha Dhamma Sangha will not be there. This is really a very serious challenge. His opponent says, if everything is empty, no Buddha, no Dhamma, no Sangha. So then what is the meaning of it? So who is Nagarjuna? Is he really a Buddhist? How can he do this? So, this is the challenge of his critic. Then for the first time in Mula Madhyamika Karika, he comes up with this idea, Dve Satye Samupasritya Buddhanam Dharmadeshana. The Dharmadeshana of the Buddha is associated with two truths. Dve Satye Samu. This chapter 24. I think the stanza number 7 or something. Dve Satye Samupasritya Buddhanam Dharmadeshana. The Dharmadeshana of the Buddha is associated with two truths. Loka Sangruti Satyancha Satyancha Paramarthata. Loka Sangruti Satya and the Paramartha Satya. So Ubhe Satya, or two truth. Dve Satya. So one is Loka Samruti Satya. Paramartha Satya. So he says that Buddha's teaching is associated with two truths, Loka Sangruti Satya and Paramartha Satya. And then he says, Yonayorna Vijanati Vibhagang Satyayoh Dvayoh Te Tattvangna Vijananti Gambhirang Buddha Shasani. Those people who do not understand the distinction between these two truths, they do not understand the deep nature of the message of the Buddha. Gambhirang Buddha Shasani, Gambhirang Tattva. Then he says, Vyavahara Manasitya Paramartho Nadeshyate. You cannot teach Paramartha without Vyavahara. Vyavahara means Sangruti Satya. Paramarthang Anagamya Nirvana Nadigamyate. Without realizing Paramartha, you cannot attain Nirvana. So you can see that there are two truths, and these two truths, you need one truth to explain the other, and then finally, without these things, you cannot realize Nirvana. So the Buddhist goal. Now, what is these two truths? What is this concept of two truths? How can there be two truths anyway in the first place? this very idea is what we call counterintuitive. It goes against our ordinary understanding. Okay? Because usually in our day-to-day life, we can't have two truths. If I did something, I did it. If I did not do it, I did not. Right? You can't have anything in between. How can you be both true or something? Two truths. How can we understand this? If there are 100 chairs in this room, 100 chairs in this room is true. But if there are not 100 chairs, then we will say there are no 100 chairs. Or 100 chairs is false if there are no 100 chairs. So like that, in any given situation, we are used to say one truth. There can't be two truths. But then what is the meaning of this whole concept of true truth? How can we understand it? Now, here lies some very important distinction we need to understand in understanding the teaching of the Buddha. So, in fact, not only in Buddhism, even in Advaita Vedanta, you get the same concept subsequently. But initially this appears in the teaching of the Buddha. Now, if you look at the discourses, in the discourses we don't have concept of true truths. But we do have concept which can be called the precursor of this concept, because something related to this, but not exactly this. Now, you remember in the discourses, Buddha talks about Nita Atha Desana and Neya Atha Desana. Buddha talks about Desana. Desana is preaching, sermon. Nita Atha Desana and Neya Atha Desana. Nita is a past participle of Nayati. Neya is also a grammatical form coming from Nayati. So Nita Atha means the meaning has been brought. This is the idea. Nita Atha. Meaning brought in. Neya Atha, meaning has to be brought in. Nita Atha and Neya Atha. Buddha says about there are certain desanas, Nita Atha, Nitatha. I split it, but usually it is a Nitatha desana or Neyatha desana. Now, Nitatha means the meaning has been brought in. Nita. Neyatha means meaning has to be brought in. Neyatha desana. In philosophical literature, Nitatha desana is called direct. We can say direct discourse. This is called indirect. Direct discourse and indirect discourse. Nitatha desana, Neyatha desana. In one discourse, Buddha says that if you confuse these two things, Nitatha desana with Neyatha desana and Neyatha desana with Nitatha desana, Buddha says that they are destroying the true dharma. So it's very serious. If you don't understand Nitatha and Neyatha, if you take Nitatha desana as Neyatha and Neyatha desana as Nitatha, Buddha says they are destroying my dharma. However, the interesting thing is, Buddha doesn't say there what is the Nitatta, what is Neyatta. If you want to know what is Nitatta and what is Neyatta, you have to go to the commentary. According to the commentary, Nitatta Desana, direct discourse, means when Buddha talks about Skandha Dhatu Ayatana, Nisatta, Nijiva, then of course that is the Nitatta Desana or direct Desana. Buddha says that there is no Sattva, there is no Pudgala, and Nisatto, Nijivo, Sunyo, right? Nisatta, Nijiva, Sunya. So that type of Desana is what is called Nitatta Desana. And the Neyatta Desana is where Buddha talks about Sattva and Pudgala, individuals, people, things. Buddha talks about those things. Now when Buddha talks about those things, Neya means we have to understand them as ultimately referring to Skandha Dhatu Ayatana and not as referring to really to Sattva and Pudgala. That's the Neyatta. In other words, Buddha talks about these things. But then we have to understand that although Buddha refers to Sattva and Pudgala, there are no such things. Now that is the Neyatta. In other words, Nitatta Desana direct, there is nothing to be interpreted. Neyatta Desana means you have to interpret and understand. For example, I think I gave you this example, another discussion in a previous discussion. When the Buddha says, Ananda, I am thirsty, bring some water. Now, how should you understand it? Nitatta or Neyatta? Now, it is very important to understand for Ananda, the Buddha is thirsty. He needs water. But actually, if you try to understand it according to Nitatta, who is thirsty? Where is the Pudgala who is thirsty? There is no such a thing called Pudgala. So how can you take, I am thirsty? But then, there you have to understand it as Neyatta. That is the Vyavahara. That is the language we are using in order to live. Okay? So, if you mix up these two languages, you are in trouble. You don't understand then things in correct manner. So, Buddha says that to make clear distinction between these two meanings is to be very important and not to confuse the meaning. Okay? Because Buddha has to talk about day-to-day language. I mean, without day-to-day language, you cannot survive. But on the other hand, you have to really show that behind language, there is no reality. So we talk about as if there are sattvas and pudgalas. But in fact, there are no sattvas and pudgalas. Buddha says that there are skandha, dhatu and ayatana, no sattva and pudgala. So to understand this correctly is the distinction. Now Buddha has not talked about this often. There is only one very short sutta. In the entire Sutta Pitaka, Buddha refers to this. Okay? But when the Buddha was teaching, I think people understood it correctly in that context. Right? They never. But if any person got it mixed up, then of course if you mix up, then you are interpreting the teaching of the Buddha, Dhammang adhammoti dipeti, adhamman dhammoti dipeti. You interpret Dhamma as not Dharma and not Dharma as Dharma. So then that way you are contributing to the destruction of the teaching of the Buddha. So this distinction is very important. Actually. So now according to Buddha Ghosha, Nitatta Desana are basically Skandha Dhatu Ayatana, that type of Desana. Neyatta means the ordinary way of referring to individuals and so on. And then when we look at this particular thing, we can see that there is a connection between Loka Samvrti Satya and Paramartha Satya. Because subsequently what came up, of course, Nitatta and Neyatta, those terms were not used subsequently, but subsequently, particularly in the Abhidhamma tradition, we have Sammuti Desana, Paramattha Desana. Here we have Loka Samruti, and Pali we have Sammuti, and then Paramattha. So we have Sammuti and Paramattha. I also told you the other day, there is a basic distinction between Samvruti and Sammuti. Sammuti comes from Samman. The root is Sampurva, Samman. So man is the root. Samman. Sammuti, to think and so on. But basically when we say Sammuti, Sammuti means agreement. Basically, Sammuti means agreement. But in Sanskrit, Samvruti, this comes from Samvru, vru to cover, vru, Samvru, Samvara. Vru means to cover, camouflage, hide something. So the idea is that Samvruti means camouflaging, covering, hiding. The idea is that, so the two meanings, when you say Sammuti, Sammuti means agreement. Now language is basically the agreement among the people. When a community of people agree to use a particular terminology, then it becomes the language of those people, right? Now, between two people, you can create a language, right? Between two people. If the two people agree to use certain words in a certain manner, others will not understand. But two people can understand because they have agreement. So Sammuti is agreement. So social agreement is the basic thing for language. Any language is a social agreement. In that sense, whatever we call, we agree. If people agree to call it in that manner, then it is language. However, Samvruti has a different meaning. Samvruti means to cover. There the idea is that language covers reality. That means language hides reality. So it gives a different meaning. So in Sanskrit they use the word Samvruti. In Pali, in the Abhidhamma, you get the concept of Sammuti and Paramattha. Now, in the Abhidhamma literature, you are familiar with Abhidhamma. You have this Duve Sacchani Akkasi, Sambuddho Vadatangvaro, Sammutim Paramattancha, Tatyang Nupalabbati. Duve Sacchani Akkasi. The Buddha said two truths. Duve Sacchani Akkasi. Now, this is, you find in Kathavattu also, and also in other Abhidharma books. Duve Sacchani Akkasi, Sambuddho Vadatangvaro. Sammutim Paramattancha Tatyang Nupalabbati. Then the important thing is, according to Abhidhamma tradition, it goes like this. Sanketa Vachanam Satcham Loka Sammuti Karanam. Paramattha Vachanam Satcham Dhammanam Tatha Lakhanam. Now what does it mean? Sanketa Vachanam Satcham, Sanketa Vachana. Sanketa Vachana means symbolic words. That means Sammuti, Sanketa, Sanketa Vachana. Now, pen, we say pen. It's a Sanketa Vachana because it refers to some object. Just we use the word Sanketa. Sanketa Vachanam Satcham Loka Sammuti Karanam, because it is the world agreement. We all agree to call this a pen. So Sanketa Vajanam Satcham Lokasammuti Karanam Paramatta Vajanam Satcham, the Paramatta is true, Dhammanam Tatha Lakhanam. Tatha means real. Dhammanam Tatha Lakhanam means it refers to the real nature of the phenomena. Dhammanam phenomena. Tatha Lakhanam, the real nature of the phenomena. So according to Abhidharma tradition, both are true. Sanketa Vachanam Satcham Lokasammuti Karana. So the Sanketa Vachana is true because it is the Lokasammuti, agreement of the world. Paramatta Vachana is Dhammanam Tatalakkanam, it refers to the real nature of the things. Now again you see the two truths. Sammuti, Paramattha. Now Paramattha, if you split this word, you have Parama Attha. Parama means highest. Attha means purpose. We usually translate this as absolute truth. Absolute truth. But if you take the word doesn't mean absolute truth. Parama means greatest, noble, highest. Attha means not really the truth necessarily. Attha means purpose, goal, what you want to achieve. So the Paramattha can be translated as highest goal, highest purpose, Paramattha. So the highest thing you want to achieve. Now you know this is very interesting. There are two ways of talking about the world. Two ways of looking at the world. What it says is both ways are true. One is true because it is the agreement in the society. The other is true because it is the real nature of the things. Now in philosophy, philosophers, not only in Buddhist philosophy, in Western philosophy and many philosophers, usually we make a distinction between what we call appearance or reality. We make a distinction between appearance and reality. Now, idea is that what appears to us is not really real. Reality is something different. It is not something that appears. Now, for example, you see the chair, but you see some kind of object. But if you analyze it, ultimately what remains is Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. But do you see Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo? No, you don't see Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. What you see is a chair. So what you see is the appearance. But what is the reality? Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo is the reality in the sense, what truly exists. So in philosophy, this idea that what appear to our senses is not really true. The truth is, something beyond that. But different philosophers from early Greek philosophy have held this view for different reasons. But in the Buddhist tradition also we have this distinction, although it has not been articulated in the same manner to some extent. When you say Sanketa Vachanam Satcham Lokasammuti Karanam, it is all right to call this a chair. So it is true at that level. However, Paramatta Vachanam Satcham, also it is true to say that there is no chair here, but only Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. That is the Dhammanam Tatalakhanam. That is the real nature of the phenomena. So appearance and the reality. What appears is not exactly the reality. So there is a distinction. This two truths idea is basically, you can see, anticipate this kind of distinction in reality. What comes into our physical eye is not really the reality. So, important thing is, it's fairly in a way straightforward. Because whatever we see through our senses may be not exactly the same. If our eyes are like microscope, Then will we see chair? No. We will see only particles. But our eyes are in such a manner, we see tables and chairs and this world. But if our eyes are different, then we will not see this the reality. So, reality, you can see that appearance is relative to many factors like our faculties, the external conditions and things like that. However, according to Abhidhamma, both are true in two different senses. Now, this concept of something to be true from one perspective, something to be true from another perspective, this idea is something very interesting. For example, in the Western philosophy, the Aristotelian logic, I will talk to you about it again later. This whole idea is, very, very the strange idea for them because, there is no such thing as two truths. But here you can see that from one perspective, one thing is true, from another perspective, another is true. Then ultimately both are true in two different perspectives. You remember we have statements like kammassa karako natti, vipakassa cha vedako. Kammassa karako natti, there is no doer for the action. Vipakassa cha vedako, there is no vedaka, experiencer of the vipaka. Suddha dhamma pavattanti, pure dhammas exist. Evetang sammadasana. This is the right view. Now this is in commentarial literature, Visuddhimagga. And then in the Sanyutta Nikaya you have Yathahi Anga Sambhara Hoti Saddo Rato iti. Evan Khandesu Santesu Hoti Sattoti Sammuti. Right? Yatahi Anga Sambhara Hoti Saddo Rato iti. You are called something to be a vehicle, ratha, when you put together the anga, all aspects. Evan Khandesu Santesu, in the same manner, when the skandhas are there, Hoti Sattoti Sammuti. The sammuti or agreement called satta arises. So this is basically this appearance and reality. So although we call satta and pudgala, ultimately khanda, rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana. So this distinction has been within the Buddhist tradition from very early period. So we have nitatta and neyatta, then we have sammuti and paramatta. Now when we come to Nagarjuna talks about Dvesatya samupasritya buddhanang dharma deshana loka sangruti satyancha paramartata. So the two truths. In fact, Nagarjuna comes to talk about this when ultimately his opponent says that, look Nagarjuna, if everything is empty, then you will not have anything. No Buddha, no Dhamma, and no Sangha, no teaching, no practice, no nothing. Now, there Nagarjuna says, no, you have misunderstood it. There are two ways of talking about it, Sangruti and Paramartha. Both are needed. Like in Abhidhamma also, both Sammuti and Paramartha are true. In the same manner, Nagarjuna says, you need Vyavahara. Vyavaharang anasritya Paramartha vanadeshyati. You can't talk about Paramartha without Vyavahara. You need it. I think to understand what Nagarjuna says, you take the concept of Shunyata. Nagarjuna says everything is Shunya. Now, whenever Nagarjuna says everything is Shunya, what he means by that is everything is Shunya of emptiness. Or you say that everything is Shunya, no, I'm sorry, everything is Shunya of Swabhava. Empty of Swabhava. Shunya of Swabhava. Now, it is very similar to what the Buddha said. Sunyang idang attenava attaniyenava. So, Buddha uses the term, this is empty. Buddha says, Sunyang idang. Sunya, in what sense? Attena. Because there is no atta. Attaniya. that which belongs to Atma. Of course, if you don't have Atta, there can't be Attaniya anyway, right? When you get rid of Atta, Attaniya is also gone. So Buddha says, Sunyang idang attenava attaniyenava. In the same manner, Nagarjuna says, Sunyang idang, this is empty of Swabhava. There is no Swabhava. So in that sense, Nagarjuna uses this concept. I think what it means is ultimately, emptiness is Paramartha. Okay, that language is, that use is in order to teach Paramartha. So the concept of emptiness has to be understood as Paramartha. Now it is like Buddha saying Skandha Dhatu Ayatana. When you are talking about the Skandha Dhatu Ayatana, then of course you cannot talk about Sattva or Pudgala, right? So, but even according to Paramartha, there is no Sattva or Pudgala. If you kill a human being, you are in trouble. You can't apply that teaching there, right? So you have to understand it correctly. In a real ultimate sense, there is no Sattva and Pudgala. But of course, on the other hand, there is Sattva and Pudgala. That is why Panatipata is wrong. So actually, if you understand these two different languages, then there is no contradiction. Otherwise, there appears to be a contradiction. So on the one hand, you say there is no Sattva and Pudgala, but on the other hand, we say that if you kill a human being, you become Parajika. What is this? But in order to understand it, we have to understand the two different ways of talking about it. Okay, my own interpretation is this. I think Sammuti or the world convention or worldly agreement we use in our day-to-day life. But in order to understand the truth behind it, we use the Paramartha. So the way I put usually is, Sammuti Satya is in order to live in the Sansara. Paramartha Satya is in order to attain Nirvana. So if you want to live in the Sansara, you use Sammuti Satya. But if you want to attain Nirvana, then you use Paramartha Satya. Okay? Because if you want to live in the Sansara, you have to have things. You have to have people. You have to have friends. All these things are there. I mean, without these things, how can you live? Okay? So you have to have Sammuti Satya. You are living in the Sammuti Satya. We are living in the Sammuti world. We don't like some people. We like some people. We fall in love with some people. We hate some others. We eat food. All these things. Now, all these are Sammuti Satya. But if you look at from the Paramartha point of view, there is no Sattva, there is no Pudgala, there is no good food, there is no bad food, nothing. Everything is Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. But then, why do you look at from that point of view? You can't continue to live with Paramartha Satya. If you see only Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo in the chair, you can't sit on that. In order to sit, you have to see it as a solid object. If you don't love your child as a mother or father, you can't raise a child. You have to love your children as mother and father. You have to love your pupils to teach as a teacher. So all these things are very different, right? How can you live without those things? So my understanding is the Sammuti and Paramartha, two different levels. One level is for the Sansara. Okay? In order to live in the Sansara, we have to assume that. So we have to assume certain things are good, certain things are bad, certain people are good, certain people are bad, and some food is good, some food is not, and all sorts of things we have to assume to live in the Sansara. Otherwise, how can you live? But if you want to go to Nirvana, attain Nirvana, get rid of these things, you can't love these things. You have to give up everything. Then you look at people as not as girls or boys or men and women or beautiful or ugly, you just understand them as Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. When you analyze into Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, there's nothing to love, nothing to hate. So, but that is to go away from the world. So, according to my understanding, Sangruti and Paramartha means two different ways of talking about, two different ways of perceiving, two different ways of interpreting the reality. Now, coming to Nagarjuna's philosophy, when Nagarjuna says everything is empty of Swabhava, that is Paramartha. It's like everything is Anatma. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Now, you look things as Anatta because through Anatta you get rid of your desire, Raga Dosa and Moha. So, by getting rid of Raga Dosa and Moha, you attain Nirvana. So, that is the path for that. So, therefore, we have to understand very clearly why Nagarjuna is coming with this idea, Sangruti and Paramartha. Up to that point, he was just saying that everything is empty, everything is empty. But when the opponent gets kind of scared, if everything is empty, how can you really live in the world? Then Nagarjuna says, look my friend, there are two ways of talking about reality. So the one way is to get rid of samsara. The other way is to live in the samsara. So here you have, so in the early discourses you have this, Nitat and Neyat. And then in Nagarjuna you have Sangruti and Paramartha. In Pali you have Sammuti and Paramartha. And then in philosophy you have appearance and reality. So can you see some connection between these two, all these things? Okay. Do you have any questions or anything about that? Two truths.
So, here Nagarjuna used the term sunyata.
Yeah.
And sunyata here is the empties of
Swabhava. Yeah.
Sabhava. But sunyata is mean emptiness. But for the Paramatha, we have the reality. But I understand that for the Nagarjuna, he used the sunyata and by the dialectics. In some case he denies, he refuses, even the Paramatha too, it's been the reality too. So this is right.
Okay, your question is Nagarjuna even rejects the idea of Paramartha. Is that what you mean? Actually, now this Sangruti and Paramartha are two ways of talking, two ways of using language ultimately. Now, when it comes to Paramartha, if you take by Paramartha, say the ultimate goal, Nirvana. Now, what is the difference between when Buddha says Sabbe Dhamma Anatta and Nagarjuna saying that Nirvana is empty? Now, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Anicca Dukkha, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Now, because Dhamma includes sanskaras plus Nirvana. So, according to the Buddha's teaching also, Nirvana is Anatma. So, Nagarjuna is saying the same thing, Nirvana is Shunya. But every time Nagarjuna says Nirvana is Shunya of Swabhava. Nirvana doesn't exist as a substantial entity somewhere. Something like that. So I don't think there is a difference. So ultimately, of course, you are right. Nagarjuna says that Nirvana is also empty. But empty means always empty is specified. Empty is not a general state, I mean, in the sense, not some kind of unconditional statement. Empty is always defined as empty of swabhava. Or you can say, sunyang idang attenama attaniyenama. This is empty of Atma. If you forget about swabhava, you can say nirvana is empty of Atma. Now, if you say like that, then of course it agrees with the early discourses of the Buddha. So, you know, for me, the difference between Nagarjuna and the early discourses is only the way of saying. Otherwise, both traditions, of course, I mean, Nagarjuna is saying the same thing. He is repeating what the Buddha said. But, you know, at that level, to see Nirvana as empty of Swabhava, or Nirvana is also as empty of Swabhava like any other thing, is kind of goes against your wish, because, you know, Nirvana is the highest goal. How can you say that it is empty? You know, something like that. But for Nagarjuna, Nirvana and including everything, nothing. That's why he said, na sansarasya nirvana kinchidasti visheshanam. There is no difference between sansara and nirvana. In the sense, both sansara and nirvana are without swabhava. So, you know. So, actually Nagarjuna's philosophy is a matter of interpreting. Now, what I am doing is also one way of interpreting Nagarjuna. Of course, you can interpret Nagarjuna differently. But the issue is whether you can consistently interpret Nagarjuna. So I think according to the way I interpret, of course, this is not only my way, I am borrowing it from people like Professor Kalupahana. The Nagarjuna can be interpreted as saying what the Buddha said. So in that sense, Nagarjuna is not an innovation really. He says it in a new manner. But essentially he is saying the same thing. Sometimes people get upset about this interpretation because they think that Nagarjuna is such a new this thing or something. Of course, Nagarjuna is so brilliant. You can see that the way he argues. But ultimately, he is reaffirming what the Buddha said. Answering your question, yes, according to Nagarjuna, Nirvana is empty.
So according to Abhidhamma, Sunyata is been the empty of Atma. But we have the reality. But to the Nagarjuna, Sunyata is been empty.
Okay, I see your point and also your struggle, because Abhidhamma talks about Paramartha and then reality as really existing. You are right, that's true. Reverend, actually if you take Abhidhamma Pitaka, Dhammasangani, Vibhanga, Yamaka, Patthana, you don't get these Paramartha Dharmas. Whole this concept of Paramartha Dharma is, you know, subsequently be produced. In fact, Nagarjuna's critique is also for Paramartha Dharma. Paramartha Dharmas are empty. Now, in the Abhidharma, you are given the impression that appearance is wrong, reality is the right one. But Nagarjuna says, no, dismantle reality also. I mean, ultimately, it looks like Buddha saying, Sattva and Pudgala are not there, but Skandha Dhatu and Ayatana are there. That is called Dharmavada. I think at the very beginning of this course, I talked to you about it. That's called Dharmavada. Dharmas exist. Now, that is the Nagarjuna's bone of contention. He says, Dharmas don't exist. Dharmas are empty. So actually, Nagarjuna is a fundamental critique of Abhidhamma. To say that Paramartha Dharmas exist, Nagarjuna says no. Paramartha Dharmas are empty. Because ultimately, of course, it doesn't mean nothing is there. We do admit that Skandha Dhatu Ayatana are there. But can Panchaskandha exist without each other? Now this is the idea. Although we talk about Sattva Pudgala, we dismantle that. Reality level 1. Skandha Dhatu Ayatana, reality level 2. But then you go beyond that, ultimately, Skandha Dhatu Ayatanas do not have true existence because they are interdependent and interrelated. You see? So actually we can talk about 3 different levels of reality. So it's something like this. Let me get rid of this. So one level is, we have, we can say, Satta Puggala. And then we say, Khanda Dhatu Ayatana. So this is one level. We can say this is one level. This is another level. And then actually number 3 level is it goes like this. So this is a Sattva and Pudgala. This is the level we are operating. And then you say Khanda Dhatu Ayatana. However, Khanda Dhatu Ayatana Anatta. Khanda Dhatu Ayatana are dependently originated. That's the Buddha's view. What happened was in the Abhidhamma, Paramattha Dhammas are Paramattha Dhammas, absolute, ultimate building blocks of the universe. But if you understand them as Anicca Dukkha Anatta, then what? What remains? Nothing remains. Now even in the Abhidhamma, of course, Khanda Dhatu Ayatana also Anicca Dukkha Anatta, right? Anicca Dukkha Anatta Paticcasamuppanna, which means ultimately Khanda Dhatu Ayatanas are also not there. But at certain level, more philosophical talking is like mathematics. When you talk about, like individual X, Y, or Z, it's Khanda, like individuals. But when you go beyond that, you talk about Khanda Dhatu Ayatana, no X, Y, Z. So you are talking in a very abstract language. Nothing to like or nothing to dislike. The chair as it is cute, beautifully made. But if you take Pataviyapo Tejo Vayu, is there any beauty or ugliness in that? No. Because that is the level Abhidhamma operates. However, Anatta means even it goes beyond that. Even those things are Anatta, or the Shunya or Sunya. So that's, I would say, 3rd level really. So in fact, Nagarjuna's critique is about Abhidharma. Even Theravada is subject to it. But I think the way to Abhidhamma to come out from that is to say Paramartha Dharmas are also Anatma. So Paramartha Dharmas in Nagarjuna's language empty. Now if you believe that way, then of course Abhidharma Paramarthas are okay. But if you think Paramarthas are Paramarthas and nothing beyond that, then that is absolutism. That is what Nagarjuna criticizes. You talk about Nibbana, Chitta Chaitanya Rupa Nibbana. But Nibbana is Anatta. Then what? So Reverend, good that you raised this question. But actual Abhidharma, where they went wrong, which is clear in Sarvastivada Abhidharma, is that they believed that these are irreducible elements in reality. You can't reduce it anymore. That was the idea. But if you apply Anatta to it, then of course whole thing disappears. So Abhidhamma is a kind of atomism, reduce everything ultimate atoms, ultimate building blocks. But real Anatmavada means even the ultimate building blocks are not ultimate. Matter is ultimately not really matter. You understand? Like we say, this is matter. But when we say Pataviyapo Tejo Vayo, is that matter? Toughness, is it matter? No. We are talking about some kind of qualities or natures or whatever. Anyhow. Why don't you take 2 minutes break and then we will come back for further discussion. Next, I would like to discuss with you a little bit Chatushkoti. This Chatushkoti is a type of logical method. Chatushkoti. Chatush means 4. Koti means corner. So in English, sometimes we say 4-cornered logic. 4-cornered logic. Or we use the term logical method of 4 propositions. That also we use the word. 4-cornered logic sometimes we use, or we use the term logical method of 4 propositions. 4 propositions. Proposition means 4 statements. Usually we know 2 propositions. 2 propositions is basically negative and positive statements are usually taken as 2 propositions. Now when we have 2 propositions, we call this bivalent logic. In English we use the word bivalent. B-I-V-A-L-A-N. Bivalent logic or bivalent logical proposition, either way. Bivalent means 2. We say either we say P or we say not P. So this is bivalent. We have 2 alternatives. In the proposition, we say there are 2 alternatives. In here we have 4 alternatives. The difference is usually when you say something is either way we say true or something is false. These are basically the bivalent logic. Aristotelian logic is also this. In any given situation, if one is true, other is false. If the other is false, the one is true. So usually this is bivalent logic, 2 propositions. When we say 4 propositions or 4 alternatives, we can also say 4 alternatives. Now 4 alternatives you can see here, hoti, nahoti, hoticha, nahoticha, never, I'm sorry, not ne, never hoti, nahoti. You can say never hoti, nahoti. Neither is, no is not. So now what is the meaning of this? Earlier we talked about 2 truths. Now here the situation is usually in the bivalent logical system we have 2 alternatives. Bivalent logic means we have 2 alternatives. P or not P. Either something is true or something is false. Now this is basically the logical thinking that ordinarily we have, and also it is the logical thinking that the Western world accepted according to Aristotle. Okay. Now looking from bivalent logical perspective, this 4-cornered logical principle is very problematic actually. Now in the early discourses you are familiar with Dasa Avyakruta Prashna, 10 unanswered questions. Tanjivan Tansariran, Anyan Jivan Anyan Sariran, Sassato Loko, Asassato Loko. And then from 7, Hoti Tathagato Paramarana, Nahoti Tathagato Paramarana, Hoticha, Nahoticha Tathagato Paramarana, Neva Hoti, Nana Hoti Tathagato Paramarana. So you have 4 positions. Now how can this be? First we try to understand the seemingly logical difficulties of saying 4. Now here, usually in the bivalent logic, either something is true or something is false. Now if you look from bivalent logic, you have only these 2. Either something is or something is not. This is bivalent logic. The book is on the table or book is not on the table, right? So this is bivalent logic. Now according to this, one is true, other is false. If this is true, this is false. Okay? If this is true, this is false. Both cannot be true or both cannot be false at the same time. In Western logical thinking, they talked about several principles. One principle is principle of non-contradiction. Principle of non-contradiction. Let me write down that here. Principle of non-contradiction. Principle of principle of non-contradiction. That means, now as I said, if this is true, this is false, right? If this is true, this is false. Both cannot be true at the same time, or both cannot be false at the same time. So that is called principle of non-contradiction. Now here, if both are true, then it contradicts with each other. If both are false, then it contradicts with each other. So principle of non-contradiction means any given situation, if P is true, not P is false. If not P is true, then P is false. That is the principle of non-contradiction. Is that clear? Where you can't have both being true, or you can't have both being false also. So if you say, now if I say the pen is on the table, pen is not on the table, 2 statements are contradictory to each other. When one is true, other has to be necessarily false. You can't have both true. Now you remember in our previous discussion we talked about Samruti Satya and Paramartha Satya. Now according to that you can have certain things from a different perspective, different point of view. Okay? So that is Samruti Paramartha. But here what you say is you can't have the pen is on the table, pen is not on the table, both cannot be either true or false. If the pen is on the table, then pen is not on the table is false. If the pen is not on the table, then pen is on the table is false. Okay? So this is what is called principle of non-contradiction. In fact, if you look at carefully, now say you go to courthouse, maybe most of you have not gone to courthouse, they will ask you, are you guilty or not guilty? Now, either you have to say, I am guilty, or you have to say, I am not guilty. But in the court, you can't say, I am both guilty and not guilty. No, you can't say like that, even though that may be true, but you can't say that. You have to say, either you are guilty or you are not guilty. When the courthouse, are you guilty or not guilty? Either you have to say, you are guilty or you are not guilty. If you are guilty, then not guilty contradicts that. If you are not guilty, then guilty contradicts that. So the very basic principle is, principle of non-contradiction is violated if you affirm both or if you deny both, principle of non-contradiction is violated. And also there is another principle, principle of excluded middle. So you have principle of excluded middle. Now what is principle of excluded middle? Principle of excluded middle means in any given situation the truth has to be one of those things. You cannot have anything in the middle. Like when you are asked either are you guilty or not guilty, either you have to be guilty or you have to be not guilty. You can't be in between. You can't say I am partially guilty, I am partially not guilty. Actually that is the real situation, but you can't say that because logic doesn't recognize it. Particularly Western logic doesn't recognize it. So in the Western logic, when you go to the courthouse, you have only one choice. Either you are guilty or you are not guilty. Now the second says that excluded middle. You have to exclude the middle. You can't be occupying the middle position. You can't be saying that I am both guilty and not guilty or something like that. Anyhow, the Aristotelian logic or the bivalent logic is based on these two principles. Is that clear to you? I know that you need to think also a little bit more about it, but basically when you have bivalent logic, we have hoti, we have nahoti. Okay. However, when we have chatushkoti, we have hoticha, nahoticha, both is and is not. Now, if you look from Aristotelian point of view, this third position violate principle of non-contradiction, right? Is that clear? This third position violate principle of non-contradiction. Because the moment you say I am both guilty and not guilty, you are putting two mutually contradictory statements together. It's like saying the pen is on the table and pen is not on the table, both are true. Can't be. Something like that. So the problem with number three position is hoticha nahoticha tatagato parammarana or whatever. It violates the principle of non-contradiction. And then you have neva hoti, na nahoti tatagato parammarana. Neva hoti. You cannot apply hoti, you cannot apply nahoti. That's the fourth position. Actually now that fourth position according to bivalent logic seem to be violating principle of excluded middle. You have to be, you can't occupy a middle position. You have to be either this or that. I mean you can't be both, also you can't be neither. Okay? You can't be both and also you can't be neither. You have to be either one. Either you have to be hoti or you have to be nahoti. Either you have to be guilty or not guilty. Either you have to be true or you have to be false. But you can't be both, you can't be neither also. So you can see that in the Chatushkoti logic, if you look at carefully, they appear to be violating some of the accepted logical principles. These are articulated in Western philosophy. But they are not only articulated in the Western philosophy. You remember when you read Nagarjuna? Nagarjuna very often when he talks about the bhava, abhava, when it comes to the third position, bhava and abhava, he simply uses this logical principle. He says that how can there be two mutually contradictory things together? You know, he simply used this logical principle, bhava and abhava. So therefore it is not only in Aristotelian logic or Western logic that these concepts are pretty much found in the Eastern logical system also. Now anyhow, question is, although apparently these third and fourth position are problematic, why did the Buddhists say this? Buddhists accepted it. Why? They seem to be going against principle of non-contradiction and principle of excluded middle. But why did the Buddhists say that? Accept it. Now, not only Buddhists, if you look at Jainas, Jainas are even worse. They have 7. What is called Saptabhangi. They say Asti, Nasti, Asticha Nasticha, Avaktavyameva, Asti Avaktavya, Nasti Avaktavya, Asticha Nasticha Avaktavya. So you have 7. Is not both. Avaktavyam means ineffable. Number 5 is Asti Avaktavyam. It is but ineffable. Nasti Avaktavyam. It is not but ineffable. Asticha Nasticha Avaktavyam. It is both is and is not and. So look at Jaina philosophy. They have Saptabhangi. They have 7. It's called 7-fold predication. So Buddhists have 4-fold predication. Aristotelian system has 2-fold predication. Buddhists has 4-fold predication. Jainas have 7-fold predication. So, like any given situation can be described in 1 out of 7. According to Buddhism, 1 out of 4. According to Aristotelian philosophy, 1 out of 2. The logical principles, logic is made by human beings. Okay. Now, as I said, there can be a situation you are not guilty completely. You take a road accident, 2 vehicles. Very often, both drivers are wrong. Right? Not only one driver is wrong, both drivers are so wrong. So you go to courts and ask, are you guilty or not guilty? Can you say that I am both guilty and not guilty? Although that is the true situation? It could be like, I am 60% guilty, but 40% I am innocent. The accident took place not only because of my fault, other guy is also fault. So, but how can you say that? According to logic, there are only 2 positions. This actually Western logical thinking, 2-cornered logic or 2 alternatives logic has been contested. But of course, that is the system they made. Life becomes in a way much more simple. Either you are guilty or not guilty. But in a situation where you are 30% guilty, 70% not guilty, it's too complicated. But simply if you say you are either guilty or not guilty, that's a different matter. Anyhow, we don't need to go into that now. But you can see that problematic situation is in the Buddhist logic. You can be having hoti na hoti. This position is also possible. The other thing is nema hoti na hoti. The 4th position is something like this. 4th position can be whether both hoti and nahoti are not applicable. Then how are you going to say that? Maybe it is the 4th. Now let us think, why Buddhists say this? Why Buddhists say hoti nahoti tathagato parammarana? About the Tathagata, you have these 4 positions, hoti nahoti. Actually, Buddhist position is this. You can use hoti in one sense. You can use nahoti in another sense. Now, if you understand it that way, then you can say that you can put hoti and nahoti together. But then you are understanding hoti not exactly in the same manner. Different manner. But then Western logic doesn't accept it. If you use hoti, it has only one meaning. But natural language has many meanings for words. That's why Western logical system came up with X, Y, and Z, P and Q. Because when you have symbols, you can't give too many interpretations for symbols. Now in the Western logical thinking, if you interpret hoti in two different ways, then you cannot use hoti, you are using two different symbols there. But in the Buddhist logical system, they say from one point of view, hoti, from another point of view, nahoti. You can say, hoti tathagato param marana. Oh, I mean simple question whether the chair exists. You can say, yes, chair exists in sammuti perspective. But in the paramartha perspective, chair doesn't exist, right? Then we can say hoti nahoti to both about the chair, isn't it? Can or cannot? Yeah, we can use hoti nahoti. Hoti in sammuti sense, nahoti in paramartha sense. Sammuti sense chair exists, but paramartha sense chair doesn't exist. So if you understand in a two different sense or two different perspective, then you can use hoti nahoti. And the fourth position is again, there can be a situation where hoti nahoti, both cannot be used. Now actually the situation about arhant is that when somebody asks what happens to the arhant after the death, what is the Buddha's answer? Buddha says, Tathagato, Satchato, Thetato, Anupalabhyamani. Even now, Tathagata is not there. Even now, what are you talking about after his parinirvana? Buddha says that even now he doesn't exist. Then Buddha says that both these terms, hoti and nahoti, are not applicable to Tathagata. Now, if both are not applicable, then what? Fourth position, neva hoti, na nahoti. So there can be situations where both positions are not guilty. I'm not applicable. Now again, for example, you take arhant. You have punya, you have papa. Okay? Ordinary putujjana. Right? Punya papa. Arhant is who? Punya papa pahinas. Arhant is? What is punya papa pahina? Come on, get up. Punya papa pahina means both punya and papa are not applicable. Then actually it's like fourth position, right? You can't describe arhant with punya, you can't describe arhant with papa. So then we can say, I mean it's not a very good example, but in a way you can say arhant is neither this nor that. So there can be situations where neither this or that is applicable. Neva sanya na sanya. I'm thinking of something else. You remember when I was teaching you logical fallacies, we had this what is called loaded question. Have you stopped smoking? Now, if you are a person who has never started smoking, stopping and non-stopping, not applicable to you, right? Both stopping and non-stopping are not applicable for a person who has never started. So fourth position can be, right? Because I'm telling you this because according to the Western tradition, they think that third and fourth positions are crazy. So they think that Indians never understood logic. All sorts of things they say. This is weird. They say that Indian never understood logic. They say Indian never understood principle of non-contradiction. No, actually Indians were, in a way you can see that they did understand principle of non-contradiction. In the ordinary way, you are lying means, you tell a lie means contradiction, right? You did X, but you say Y. Then lying means every time you lie, your action and your word contradict each other. So principle of non-contradiction are there. But on the other hand, there can be situations where you can use both hoti and nahoti. But both Hoti and Nahoti at different times or from different perspectives. And then Neva Hoti, Nana Hoti can be used in for certain things. Neither Hoti or Nahoti are not applicable. Actually, about the problem of Tathagata, Buddha says that bhavati na bhavati. Now, if you look at Nagarjuna, coming to Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna clearly says that, look at Nagarjuna's chapter 25, Nirvana Pariksha. In the Nirvana Pariksha, Nagarjuna says that bhava, abhava, bhava and abhava, neva bhava, na abhava, all these four positions are not applicable to nirvana. So there in Nagarjuna's philosophy, Nagarjuna rejects all four. In some situations we can say that all four are not rejected. One situation can be applicable. Okay, that is one possibility. But in other cases, in many cases, Nagarjuna says that none of the four positions would apply to nirvana. Nirvana is not a bhava, nirvana is not abhava, nirvana is not both bhava and abhava, nirvana is neither bhava nor abhava. Why nirvana is neither bhava nor abhava? Because bhava and abhava are not applicable to nirvana. You can't talk about nirvana having bhava, existence or non-existence. Then you are attributing some kind of existence like any other object. So in other words, you can't talk about, I mean, there are many categories like that. We have, say, graduate and postgraduate. But if you are just an ordinary person, you are neither graduate nor postgraduate, right? Because there can be many things like that which are not applicable. So anyhow, my discussion is this. If you look at Chatushkoti, this Chatushkoti logical system is used by the Buddha. This format is also used by the Buddha. Not exactly in the same manner, but if you look at Buddha's discourses, you find things like, you remember Attantapo, Parantapo, Attantapocha, Parantapocha, Neva Attantapo, Ne Parantapo, you remember that? Buddha says that there are 4 different people in the world. Attantapo. Who is Attantapa? Attantapa. What is Attantapa? What is Attantapa? Attantapa. Parantapa. What is it? One who torments oneself. One who gives suffering to oneself. Tapa, tapati. Attang tapa, parang tapa. One who gives suffering to others. Then the third position is attang tapo, parang tapo. Fourth position is neva attang tapa, na parang tapa. Now there are all these 4 groups of people in the world, right? Some people attang tapa, some people parang tapa, some people both, some people neither. Who are neither? Who are neither? Give me an answer. Who are neither? Some people. Huh? Yeah. Arahant can be neither attantapa nor parantapa. Buddha can be neither attantapa nor parantapa. So like that. So you can see that in the Buddha's discourses, you see this. But if you look at exactly logical point of view, attantapa, parantapa is not really the logical alternatives. Attantapa has to be na attantapa. But here, attapara, 2 different categories. So not a 100% good example of Chatushkoti, but the structure is Chatushkoti structure. But in Nagarjuna's, you have bhava, abhava, bhava and abhava, neva bhava, na abhava, exactly the Chatushkoti form. But these forms are rejected by Nagarjuna because, existence, non-existence and things like that are considered to be metaphysical concept. So you cannot apply to nirvana any of these concepts. So Nagarjuna rejected it. But anyhow, so what is the distinction between these bivalent logic or two propositions and the four propositions? Actually, the four propositional thing, Chatuskoti, is definitely much broader. In the bivalent logic, you are given only two alternatives, either this or that. But in many situations in our life, you can't reduce your life into this or that. I mean, for the sake of convenience, we say some people are good and some people are bad. But are they really good and really bad? No. Good people are good by percentage, right? 60% good, 40% bad, we call them good, right? 60% bad, 40% good, we call them bad. But what about the 40%? Do you have 100% good people? Maybe Arahant. Apart from that, we don't have 100% good people. We don't have 100% bad people. So the reality is that although you say good and bad, there are no people like that. You know this Chinese concept, yin and yang? You know yin and yang, right? Femininity and masculinity. Okay, you are a man. What does it mean? Maybe you are 70% man, but 30% woman. You are a woman, but maybe 70% woman and 30% man. There are some men and women like almost 50-50 men. It goes like that. But so these Chinese were very, very clever because they grabbed this idea, and this is just for fun. Have you seen this? What is this? We have something like this, and then here we have, okay, so like that, and then here we have what is called gray line. So this is, we say white, but in the white you have black, and then this is black, in black you have white. So and then here you see it goes like this, but in the Aristotelian logic you have something like this, exactly 50%, 50%. Right? But then here it goes like this. And then in the white you have black. In the black you have white. So this whole yin yang is going against Aristotelian logic, isn't it? Because Aristotelian logic is straightforward. 50% good, 50% bad. You are either good or bad. But then Chinese would say, it's like Taoism, like water, flexible. So, no good people completely, no bad people completely either. But that's true. I think that's more real, right? No good people is 100% good, no bad people is 100% bad. Like nothing perfect. So, you can see the Eastern Asian way of thinking is different. Now, Chatuskoti is a good example. Chatuskoti goes, in that manner. So where, you can have much more complex situations. Anyhow, when you read Nagarjuna, you can see that Nagarjuna uses Chatuskoti quite a lot. Okay? And Nagarjuna want to show that, very often, none of the four positions apply to certain things, like to the Buddha, to the Nirvana, and so on. Okay. So, in understanding the Nagarjuna's philosophy, we can see that Chatuskoti being used by Nagarjuna, four positions, to show that any of the four positions are not applicable to Nirvana, not applicable to the Buddha, and so on and so forth. Okay, folks. So, I highlighted two things: two truths, and also the Chatuskoti logical system. So, finally, when we try to understand Nagarjuna, what Nagarjuna is doing, as I said at the very beginning, his one main idea is to show that nothing has Swabhava. However, how does he show that? In order to show it, Nagarjuna uses the concept of Shunyata. Now, what is Shunyata? We come across this statement, Shunyata Yah Pratitya Samutpadam Shunyatantam Pratakshmahi. What we call Shunyata is Pratitya Samutpada. So actually, in other words, Shunyata is another term for Pratitya Samutpada in Nagarjuna's philosophy. Yah Pratitya Samutpadam Shunyatam Tam Pratakshmahi Sa Prajnapti Rupadaya Pratipat Saiva Madhyama. So it is the Madhyama Pratipat. And then what is Shunyata? Shunyata Sarva Drustinang Prokta Nissarananjinai. Shunyata is to get rid of all the views. Then finally you remember we read the last chapter of Nagarjuna and the last chapter of the book. The last stanza says, what is the last stanza of the last chapter? Deshayamasa sambuddhas tang vande vadatam varam sarva drusti prahanaya yah saddharma vadeshayat. I salute the Buddha who taught the Dhamma in order to give up all the views. So ultimately, you give up the Atma view. Therefore, according to my analysis, I will locate Nagarjuna's philosophy in the Buddhist soteriology, where in the Buddhist soteriology at the level of Ditti Visuddhi, Chitta Visuddhi and Ditti Visuddhi. So you get rid of your Atma Drusti, Sakkaya Ditti. That is the soteriological level of Nagarjuna's philosophy. Okay, I wind up from that. Hope you get some idea about Nagarjuna. But of course, you don't have to interpret Nagarjuna exactly the way I am interpreting. Of course, you are welcome to accept it. That's a different thing. But you can develop your own interpretation of Nagarjuna. Okay, it was nice to have been able to talk to you about Nagarjuna with you. Any questions?